Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree the Podcast is brought to you by Soccer90.com, your ultimate destination for FC Dallas, North Texas Soccer Club, and European club gear. Man, they got everything on there. I saw some Dortmund stuff, some stuff out of Mexico, some of course the big ones, the Man Cities and whatever. They got everything you want. Listeners of Third Degree, the podcast, get 20% off your order if you use the code Third Degree at checkout. Some exclusions may apply.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another episode of Third Degree, the podcast, this one numbered in sequential order of 227, episode 227. Hi, I'm Peter. We are without Dan today, at least to start. He has gone AWOL. He is missing. Should we issue a Amber Alert or a Burn Alert? What would we call that? We'll have to think about that. But anyway, Dan is not with us, at least at this point. Maybe he'll pop up during the recording session, which we are doing late on a Wednesday evening. But that does leave me left to introduce your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, founder, editor of ThirdDegree.net, the original Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Well, hi, Peter. I have a complaint to make, not to you.
Oh, no.
I just want you to hear
it. Starting the pod with complaining already.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the deal. About a year ago, my wife pointed out to me some fashion magazine that talked about how soccer shoes were now a new thing to wear, particularly Sambas at the time were a thing. People would buy them and wear them with fancy clothes. And then about a month and a half ago, apparently they've shifted over, whoever the powers that be are, have shifted over now to where like gazelles are the thing. The shoes I've been wearing for 30 years now cost $120 instead of
$50 they used to cost.
Yeah. So all of a sudden I'm now paying, or I'm not paying, as the case may be, because I'm not paying that kind of money for my gazelles.
2X, right?
Yeah.
So.
I'm not doing that.
Buzz, I think quietly under my breath, I've said on several occasions that you are a fashionista and a trendsetter. So I think this just proves me to be correct.
I think this is one of those things where a broken watch is right once a day or something. It's not like it's something stylish I choose. It's just the shoes that I like to wear, and it's like all of a sudden they're really expensive.
I already know what's going to happen. My wife is going to watch that Project Runway show that she loves so much one night in a few months, and there's going to be a whole bunch of visors on models' heads. And I'm going to go, look, Buzz did it again. He started a visor trend.
Oh, certainly not. Oh, yeah.
Look at that hot model in a visor. Boy, there's nothing sexier than a visor and some gazelles.
Yeah. Well, that one's even more simple to explain because I have a lot of hair. So when I wear a baseball hat, my head itches like crazy. So I wear visors. That's it's function, man. It's not, me. I'm not. Right. I've been wearing the same style of clothes, the same khaki, like 80s Breakfast Club khakis.
You have dressed the same way since the day I met you 30 years ago, man.
This is not fashion.
No. You're just a bigger version. We're just both bigger versions of the same person. Well, I have less hair than you met 30 years ago, but you, on the other hand, have all of your follicles operating at full speed. No doubt about it. By the way, so what size gazelles do you wear?
13s.
All right, so Buzz wears 13 gazelles. If there's some sort of wealthy FC Dallas Curious person out there that wants to help Buzz out with a new pair of gazelles at the new pricing structure, I bet he gives you a free month of Patreon in exchange for those.
God.
Yeah. All right. Do you only wear the black gazelles, or do you wear any of the colored gazelles?
I usually do black or blue, one of the two. Those are fine. And they've lately started adding like a few more interesting kind of patterns. I don't want anything too flashy, and I was kind of interested in some of those not flashy patterns, but something slightly more different just to mix it up a little bit. And I was looking, and they're like $120. Yeah, so that's not happening.
I'm a Puma suede guy, and they're still $60 a pair, and they come in a rainbow of colors. So,
well, maybe they'll get around to your Puma suede eventually.
Stop it!
From Sambas to now gazelles, and so it's ridiculous. I'm gonna go dig my old Sambas out of the closet. I got a pair of those too.
Don't F up my suedes, man. Okay, well, there's shoe talk on Third Degree the podcast. So I bet Dan's just kicking himself listening to this, going, "How did I Shag and mish that. Oh,
Yeah.
that's my Dan impression.
That's a terrible Dan
That's a
impression.
Dan. Oh, that's a terrible Dan impression.
that's
Okay. Well, here we are, and we do have a game to talk about, although we don't have a game to preview. We do have a game to review, and that would be FC Dallas 2, Atlanta United 2. Buzz, you were there. Why don't you tell everybody what you thought about this spectacle?
Well, I watched it on TV. I wasn't there.
Oh, I thought you were there.
No. I was doing something else. I can't remember what I was doing, but I wasn't. I think I was working. I was not at the game. I just watched it when I got home and had it wasn't that far behind the live game. I was not, I think there probably are people that will be upset that they tied at home. You never like that, and they don't like the fact that Atlanta got back in it and stuff. But I actually was not too concerned about this particular result for two reasons on a macro level. And one is that, well, I don't think the defense was quite as good as you would want it to be normally. Well, they didn't have Nkosi Tafare. So, of course, it wasn't as good. So I'm not worried about it.
And why did they not have Tafare?
I haven't asked yet, but I'm assuming it's a rotation question, because there was 3 games that week, and then he started the first 2 with one with Jose and one with Ibiaga. So it wasn't surprising. Remember, they have this idea, they trumpet all the time, that they have 3 starting center backs and they're going to start any 2 of them in any given game. Well, it ain't as good when Nkosi ain't in there. So that's clear as day. So other than that, I'm not particularly worried about that scenario. I actually thought Giovanni Jesus, of all people, had a really good game. The one stat that stands out to me that was slightly worrisome in this particular case, and I think is a straight symptom of Nkosi not being in there, was Atlanta had 13 shots, which is not horrible for a team like Dallas to allow the other team to 13. That's fine, but 6 of them were on goal. Now that's higher than usual for FC Dallas. Jimmy had 4 saves and let in 2. If you're giving 6 on goal, that's not that great. And I think that's a symptom of Nkosi not being in there. So yes, while you should be concerned about that, the solution is obvious: play the better player. So on the other side of the coin, I thought there was several things happen offensively I thought were really, really good. It made me feel good about as long as you get the right personnel in defensively, and you have the right, and these people that have come back and now they're looking healthy, looking better offensively. I felt pretty good leaving this game about their chances to right the ship and get back in the playoffs, because their fall apart with the playoffs is just injuries and Jesus missing for like a month for the Gold Cup. That's all it is. So I felt good about it afterwards, even though they tied.
Really? I came away from the game a bit frustrated and concerned. I don't know. I got a lot of thoughts about it, Buzz. But tell me, what is the basis of your hopeful, or how you came to be feeling good about this?
Well, they returned to with the return of Jesus. They went back to their normal transition game, and they only had 40% possession, which is fine. That's what they do. They don't want the ball. But out of that 40% possession, they got 16 shots on goal, which is higher than normal. Yeah. And they ended up with an XG. If you're into the XG thing, I'm not particularly a fan of it, except that it can show you in a general philosophy way how you felt the team was playing. And they had 2.3 XG to 0.6 for Atlanta. So when you have, 16 shots on goal, there's a little bit of a disconnect in that they only had 3 of them on goal of the 16. And this is what we talk about with this team. When this team is on in terms of its finishing, then they win games. So when you have a guy like Jesus who's been out with the Gold Cup for a while, the team was playing relatively well and doing some different things than when he was last here. You had guys that had been hurt and been missing. And they come back together and they put together this hypothetical chances to score. This 2.3 XG is what that means, is hypothetical chances to score. That means that you're playing in a good way. If they're slightly rusty and you don't get enough of them converted because you don't get quite enough of them on net, that doesn't bother me too much. I think as you play together with Jesus being back and Allen being back in the midfield, again, it's the first time he's done that with Jesus, really, that I'm not too worried about it. I think that's a thing that'll get better as they go forward from here.
Okay, well, what do you think about the way that he played the team with Illarra and his midfield setup and some of the changes that we saw there?
It was a little bit more like, nothing is locked in stone these days, but it definitely had more of a double pivotish kind of look. Illarramendi was different. deeper, excuse me. It had more of a 4-2 kind of vibe. Allen played a fair bit higher. I think some of that is tactical tweaking based on the opponent. I think there'll be scenarios, but it'll be more of the traditional either 4-2-3-1 where Allen will be deeper, or in the wings will be slightly higher, or you'll see a version this is what they normally play, which is the straight 4-3-3 when you'll have Illarramendi being a little more of a linking 8 like he's done in the previous games when Allen was an 8, but he was the more free 8. They mix that ratio and shape up all the time. So I'm assuming we'll see a little bit more of the other two versions and a little bit less of this 4-4-2 that we've saw in this particular game, because that's unusual for this coach when he doesn't have to play Jimenez.
Were you surprised that he threw the two new guys out there together at the same time to start?
I was surprised Frazier started, because I think Frazier's been particularly poor in the two games he's played before this. I think it was just Facundo had to go 90 twice. And it was a combination of, okay, it's time to start Illarramendi for a game, and also I really need to not start Facundo for a game. Frazier was okay. He wasn't terrible, but I think it's pretty clear that he's just going to be a depth piece, that he's not the piece you would choose to start, other than the fact that they're going to, after this week off, they're going to have a boatload of games with a midweek game every week. And so he's going to have to play some, maybe even as close to a ratio as Edmund was playing, which is maybe 1 out of 3. He's going to have to start possibly.
And I guess the fact that he didn't start Paxton with Illara is more evidence that the new Spaniard is more of a 8 than a 6, because obviously you wouldn't play those two guys because Paxton isn't going to be the 6.
Well, I think if you had like a full winter to do it, or if you were going to play a 4-4-2 all the time, you could play those guys, because you can play double 8 in a 4-4-2.
Sure.
That's like an old school England, with Gerrard and who's the other coach that we used to play with him? Now a coach, Lampard.
Yeah.
Those guys are basically both 8s. Really,
that never worked very well.
It never worked great, but it depends. That's the old way. Like Deering Pereira was a double 8 look all the time. It can be done if you have like a winter to work on it. I don't think it's ideal though. And I think it does underline. And I want to come back to Illarramendi with some numbers on his time in FC Dallas so far in a bit, and I want to talk about what he's doing. But I don't want to talk about it in the context of playing him with Paxton. But you're right. I don't unless you make Paxton, unless you legit turn him into a 6, which I'm not suggesting you do, but you could. Illarramendi at this point is going to be an 8, so it's kind of have to figure out how to do that.
Well, we'll get to Illara in a second. I do want to mention, I agree with you. Frazier has been, I don't know what I expected out of the guy, but it's not much. He certainly doesn't have a big bag of much.
I don't even know that. I don't think he's any better than Edwin for sure. I think it's at best it's even, and I don't even think it's even. I think Edwin's much better. Yeah, so far. Now listen, I'm okay with giving the guy some time. He's not quite into the prime of his career. It's okay to have workmen like dudes on your roster that you run them out for a game now and then. Probably in this particular case, they might have felt like what you would lose in linking play, you would gain from Yara in linking play. So probably there's a trade-off there that they would feel good about. So I'm sure that was part of the calculation, was putting him in with who he put him in with. It's probably part of it.
Yeah, I just, there were long stretches of the game where I'm like, I can't even find him on the field on TV. Like, I was just trying to figure out where he was for a lot of it. And again, to be fair to him, he's new to the team. He's playing with another guy in the middle of the field that he's never played with before. And they're both kind of finding their footing. But there was a significant and noticeable difference between Illara and Frazier in all aspects of the game.
Yeah. Between those two guys, look, I think Frazier at best is a pure 6 destroyer only. Mm-hmm. He has some time at center back, which will tell you like how he is. He's just a pure defensive player. He's not going to give you anything, I don't think, going forward. That's not what he does. I'd have to look a little bit more carefully at what he does for Canada, but I'm pretty sure he just sits in there in front of the defense, like Facundo, and doesn't really move around very much, except Facundo's got, other things that he brings to the table that Frazier isn't.
Well, that's concerning because I don't feel like he did that very well for Dallas on Saturday night.
Well, that's probably a little part of the defensive not so greatness was, his performance in there wasn't stellar, but I've certainly seen worse defensive performances in the central midfield. But you look at his line, and basically he had like 1 tackle and 1 intercept, and that was really about it. It just doesn't really, maybe he's in the right place. Maybe he's disrupting things. I'm not seeing, like 4 recoveries, just not. I just feel like he's a guy who, when you see him doing lots of loan deals down to the second team in Toronto and going to like a second tier team overseas, he's just not quite prime MLS. He's roster filler to, and just taking up a space when you were really desperate. I mean, obviously the rest of this year it'll be Facundo, 10 out of 10, except for when you burn him out, you're going to have to use him some. And that's why it might actually be worth a discussion to try and figure out, do you have an 8 you can play like in a double 8 look and help him, which they obviously tried to do here, or just play Illarramendi and Paxton and see if that's good enough if you're playing a 4, and from now and then. I wouldn't do it every game, but obviously Facundo will have to be the choice now at this point.
Well, now that we got a full game of watching him, why don't you dive into a kind of what you thought about Illara and his performance and his numbers?
Spectacular. I thought in this game he was just absolutely spectacular. You can see, or I can see, I hope other people can see it, there's a real pure class to his game that you're not used to seeing in this league. The quality of the touch, the field awareness, positional awareness, like who's around you, how to move into space, recoveries, passing forward. And I dug out a few numbers. Now, 100%, let's remember this is a small sample. This is just now with 1 start and a couple of bench appearances. But in what we've seen, which is all we have to judge him on, let's talk about how good it is. So in this particular game, he had 8 progressive passes, which is spectacular. Still had 4 tackles and 3 intercepts, which that's really high, and 14 recoveries. Those are amazing numbers in this particular game. And when you add in the other 2 performances, these are just a few. And I'm going to give you a couple of numbers because I think people might be like, what you're talking about, I'm not seeing. So I'm going to try and explain it to you with numbers. Not you, Peter. I'm sure you see it, but for the audience. So,
I'm up for learning, Buzz.
Yeah. So he has, over this now sample of 3, I think it's 3 appearances, start and 2 subs, he has 9.4 progressive passes per 90. The number 2 guy is Edwin at 5.4, and he's gone. So he's double the next best guy, basically, at progressive passing, which is passing that breaks a line, basically. All right, passes into the final third. He has per 90 minutes, which is the big, like we always talk per 90 minutes, right? So we're extrapolating it out over what would be a game. He has 13 per game. It's 12.9, but that's 13. Number 2, bizarrely, is Frazier, which again points to small sample size. But then Facundo is at 5 per 90 minutes. So he's double Facundo at passes into the final third. Passes into the penalty area, 1.76. Number 2 is Leggett at 1.4, and Paxton's at 1.36. So again, everything that you like in these other guys, he does better. Recoveries, almost 12 per 90 minutes. Eben was at 8, and Facundo's at 7.1. Intercepts, which is, we all know what intercept is. He's almost at 3 intercepts a game, which is number 1 again, ahead of Frazier, Paxton, Facundo, ahead of the people that are supposed to have it. But he's not a 6, remember, he's an 8. Progressive carries. Progressive carries is when you dribble past somebody, basically, right? He's not a guy that dribbles past people. He's a sit deep and pass guy, right? Clearly, you watch him play. He's still 4th in progressive carries. Only Velasco, Bernie, and Dante, 3 of your most aggressive dribbling wings, are better in progressive carries than he is. So in all phases of an 8's play, progressive passing into the box and final third, recoveries, interceptions, defensive effort, dribbling, he's better than everybody else in the team over these 3 games, by a long shot in some cases. Sure, 100%, small sample. How's it going to hold up? He's age. But the pure class and skill that he's bringing to the table is just a whole tier above the normal in MLS. So the downsides are how old is he? How's he going to hold up over a long season? In the heat, all that kind of stuff. All those things are concerned. What's he getting paid? We have no idea. That's a huge factor. If it's like $3 million, I'm going to be mad. If it's $500K, oh my God, the steal of all time. So, these things are all going to factor when we think about him forever. But over 3 appearances now, spectacular performances so far.
Yeah, I saw in the stats, and I don't know, because the MLS site in the stats doesn't tell you the number of, at least where I'm looking right now, but to find out that his passing completion percentage was 90% for a center midfielder, that's mind-blowingly great. That's really, really good.
Yeah, that is good. The further up the field you go, the lower the number you'll go. And we get real excited when we see center backs at 90%. Like Hedges over the last couple of years would pass it around 90% because he really worked at that and got good at it. Especially when it was Lucci ball, it was really high. You'd see 90, 92%. To do 90% in central midfield for a linking midfielder is off the charts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you said, I hope everybody can see the difference. There is something there, and you can see why they brought him in. And so when we complain about a signing like Ansa, who appears to be, another insert name of right wing or left wing player here, blowout here, you got to give him credit when they sign a guy like this. Now, can he hold up? Can he, he's an older dude. How's this going to play out? I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he affects the rest of the season with 8 games left.
Yeah, for sure. There are still things to be holding back of is it going to work long term? But like in this game in particular, he had 66 touches, which is, that's like 15 ahead of the next highest person. And Frazier, while you said I hardly knew he was there, he only had 37, so he had roughly half as many touches. So the entire team already identifies the fact that this is the guy. We're going to play through this guy. And it's going to be, obviously, it looks like in the short-term sample, really, really good. And you're talking about a game where the team had almost no possession, 40% possession, and he still put up staggering numbers in terms of entry passes and things, line breaking. It's just phenomenal.
All right, let's push up the field a little bit and talk about the front four, which was Bernie, Velasco, Arriola, and Jesus. And your kind of general feeling about how the attack felt in this particular game, because it's certainly something we've been very concerned about.
Yeah, I thought Paul Arriola was my man of the match, mostly because he was back to the form of what Paul should be. He looked like Paul for the beginning of the season. Now, that's not Paul from last year, but now he no longer looks like a guy that's on the danger of being on the rehab pile.
Struggling to remember how to run straight.
Yeah, he actually looked like he could run. Yeah. So, and he connected well and he did really good things. So I thought he was really, really good, especially compared to how desperately they need him to be really good and how poor he was even just 2 weeks ago. One of the things I wanted to say about Paul is I don't know if you ever talk about this, in your life, but there are major stress events one has in life that can cause disruptions to what you do for a living or your performance or whatever. And there are major events like moving, changing jobs, getting married, having a kid. Well, in the last year,
being left off the World Cup roster.
Being left off the World Cup roster. Paul got married. He's having a kid. He got a major injury. His mother-in-law passed away. So he had 3 or maybe if you could get hurt in the World Cup, he had 5 massive stress events in his life, all in the space of 1 year. So if you wonder why maybe he fell off a little bit, mentally speaking, it's clear as day to me what those probably were. You would point at getting married and having a kid, those are awesome. They are awesome. They're still stressors. They still stress your life and change your life and put you in a place you've never been before in terms of how your life is going to work. I imagine that his wife, I don't know for sure, but I imagine she is now living in Dallas full time, may or may not have before, but he used to go to California all the time. So these are major stressing life events all happening at one time for him. The same season he was made captain, same season he got left out the World Cup, and the same season he had a massive injury. So, I'm cutting him a little bit of slack in amongst all that. And I really like just what he looked like when he got back, because they're not going to do squat unless Jesus is here and playing and Paul Arriola's back in form.
Yeah, and I think what really is the part that's frustrating as a fan is that when Velasco is cooking in the form that he is of late, and especially now is being able to play kind of a more middle central position and affecting the game that way, and Paul doing Paul things on the right, and Jesus, my opinion in this particular game is that Jesus started very poorly. His first touch was terrible to start this game, and he worked his way into it and got better and more dangerous as the game went on. The thing that continues to plague this team is its inability to find a left-wing player. Yeah. And the fact that Bernie Kamunga, who is not a left-wing player, is who you at this point have to turn to play that at this point in the season, after you've signed all these other people to, numerous, endless list of people to do it, is the thing that is one of those things that continues to hold this team from getting to that next level in my, observation.
Jesus had 8 shot creating actions and 2 goal creating actions. He only got 1 assist, I think it was, but he was involved in the build up for the other one. So, you're looking at a guy when he's on, it is a key catalyst for what this team's doing. He way blows them out of the water in key passes. Now that's a padded stat because he takes the corners, but when he's going, the team is going, and you're right. He should have scored. Like, he should have been better than he was, and he was still really, really good. You could have easily picked him as man of the match, even though he didn't score, just because of how his performance was and how the team reacted around him. It's a shame that Bernie's probably going to be out for like 6 weeks, with his collarbone, but while Bernie isn't really good about making everybody around him better, he is about 50% on these chance taking. Like, when he gets these opportunities, he gets about half of them.
Oh, that was a fantastic finish.
Yeah,
I still don't think people have spent enough time kind of reflecting on the chance that he took and how he took it and how well he finished it. It was, he's just a kid, and it was really good.
Yeah.
But I think the rest of the game for Kamungo, he struggled in that position.
Yeah, he does. There's been 4 or 5 games in the last month and a half where he had a chance to win the game, and he won about half of them and he missed about half of them. But you're right. Other than that, he doesn't have the overall team concept and impact that Paul Arriola does. Now, granted, Bernie just got to MLS, so I'm not too worried about it. But you're right. It's like Bernie shouldn't be needing to start yet. He should be a filler and a guy that's going to come out of the bench. You should have other better options, and it's a shame that you basically have your other option at this point is basically Obrian or slightly smarter Obrian. Ansa and Obrian to me are the exact same player, which is my frustration with the signing of Eugene Ansa. Is like, you went out and got a player that's exactly like the player you already had. Now, he's a tiny bit better, not tiny. He's a step better in terms of team integration and concepts. He's just a tiny bit smarter, but he doesn't necessarily use it in an impactful way. Effectively, you have the same 2 players in Obrian and Ansa, neither one of which are going to help you solve this problem of having legit left wing on it. It doesn't seem like to me. And so that, in a way, that signing, even if he's only slightly better than Obrian, he's pretty much Obrian, and it's a waste of a signing. Those are the kind of frustrating, the FC Dallas signings that I can't stand, are these kind of retread second or third tier. I mean, we've seen a boatloads of them over the years. Like, I love a 20-year-old, a Velasco, even a Giovanni Jesus. I love that kind of signing. You're looking for a big hit, right? Well, this other dude is just a middle of the park. Like, Frazier is just a middle of the park roster guy. Granted, you needed a body. I get it. So you made a move. And then Eugene Ansa is like, I already had that guy. I already had Obrian. I need another one of those guys. I need something better than that. But again, they were limited on money. So what could they do, I guess?
Yeah, I would pay I'd pay a subscription to watch a series of how Dallas goes about scouting and finding and making decisions to sign these guys.
Yeah, that was the mystery to me. It was like, they talked about trying to get Ansa for like a year, and I'm like, this is the guy you've been trying to get?
I know,
maybe it's one of those guys where, 6 months from now, or like after a whole winter, it'll be like Cobra, where we'll be like, man, I can't believe we doubted this guy. But over like the first month so far, he looks like just a slightly smarter Obrian, which is not all that great, frankly.
Well, maybe that harkens back to the days of Oscar Pereira, who we always got frustrated with. They'd sign a guy and you would never see them play until like 2.5, 3 months after they joined the team, because Oscar was so convinced that he had to put him through the baking process first. And by the time we saw him, the season was almost over, it felt like.
This is how I feel about it right now, right? Dante Sealy, like as a wide mid or a wing back, has been terrible. But when he's been as a wing, he's looked interesting. At this point, just start Dante Sealy at wing over Obrian or Ansa. Neither one of those guys is given. I'd rather suffer a little bit with Sealy, because at least maybe you could develop him into something eventually, especially if Bernie's going to be hurt. It's like, just play Sealy.
Yeah.
If you're going to play a 28, 29-year-old who's not going to get any better and kind of is just like, whatever, just give me the kid instead. I'll take the kid every time.
Well, I'm sure the thinking is, hey, we're still chasing a playoff spot. We got to make the playoffs.
I'm sure.
And it's a veteran versus a rookie thing and all of that. But yeah, okay. Well, I guess we should all feel we should all feel good that they didn't end up dropping all 3 points.
Yeah.
But I'm still not convinced that, I don't know. It's just, I was hoping for a win in this one. The way the schedule is going to play out for Dallas, this was one that 3 points felt like it was kind of necessary.
Yeah. Well, when you look at the grand scheme of things, they're the second worst offensive team in the West. Only Colorado is worse. They only have 29 goals, right? So, the bottom line is they have to keep every game tight. They have to keep the game really defensive. And they have one of the best defensive records in the West, too. So every game is going to be close. You have one little hit to the mix. Take out a guy, whether it's a guy defensively or Jesus offensively, you're going to tie games or lose games. Like, you have to have everybody that's your key players here, and they all have to be on, for you to get these games, because your team is just built that way. It's just built keep games really tight and keep the games really low scoring, so it's going to be a lot of 1-1s, 1-0s, like a 2-goal game for yourself is like, oh, that's fantastic. Well, they haven't given up 2 goals at home. Probably, I haven't looked yet because they haven't put the stat out, but I bet you that the stat's going to be something like that was the first 2-goal game they've allowed in a year or something. They just don't usually do that. And I think it's just because you took Tafari and Paz out, right? I mean, Jimmy Maurer is a decent backup. The other 2 center backs are decent backups. But you lose both of those guys in one game, well, that's a pretty big hit, and that's why you tied the game.
Yeah, I get the concept of rotating and trying to give guys time off, but with the international break coming up and none of those, and Tafari not getting a national team call up yet, he was too critical especially against Atlanta, who has scored the second most goals in the Eastern Conference. Being a guy in there that clamps that down. The goal that the Greek guy scored and just kind of schooled Ibi for the header. My feeling is Tafari plays that better than Sebastian does, at least more athletically.
Yeah, that dude should not have been on the field anyway. But I agree that once you lose Paz, I think you have to reevaluate and say to yourself, I can't not have Tafari. I got a week off, right? There'll be plenty of time to recover. He's 26. That's young enough that he'll be fine. When I now have 14 days before I play again. It would have been fine. I think. He probably did it in order to keep the other guys sort of in the mix and feeling like they're a starter. Yeah, man. Once you lose Paz, the pause to Jimmy drop is too big. I respect Jimmy as a solid MLS backup right now. He's okay. He's not great. He's 36 or something. So you have to recognize that, man, I got to bring my frontline defense, especially because you have Giovanni Jesus on the other side, who is not particularly good defensively. Now, this was one of his better games because it's a home game, but it's still, I would have absolutely started Tafari, but maybe we don't know something. Maybe there's a knock. Maybe there's something we don't know about, it's very possible, but
yeah.
He didn't mention anything post-game. I read all those quotes and he didn't come up, so.
I know people get tired head when VAR talk comes up, but I have to be honest, I was a bit surprised that Giakoumakis wasn't given a yellow card for the elbow, because I thought on VAR, I get that VAR can't issue a caution, right? That's one of the scenarios that it has to be a red card matter. But I'm fairly certain that if you were to ask pro referees off the record how that actually works, yellow cards are communicated to referees all the time, because there have been more than my fair share of observations where incidences have happened, no card is shown, and as replays are being shown, suddenly 35 seconds later, a yellow card comes out because you see in the replay, oh, that's actually a little harder than I thought. And I'm convinced, I don't have any proof of this, but I'm convinced VAR officials are going, yeah, that's probably a yellow.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm shocked that in this instance that didn't happen, because I would make the argument that if you are really paying attention to that replay, he looks like he intends to do exactly what he did.
Yeah, I agree completely. I actually thought that the quote-unquote violent conduct was something you could suggest that the referee should go look at. Maybe there's a feeling that wasn't clear and obvious violent conduct, but maybe I'm not understanding that part. But I 100% agree. Compared to the one Ibiaka got for later, where his arm is up and out, but he's not swinging. It's just up and out. Versus this one is up and out. And particularly in the context of he already got a card wrecking a dude, was clearly really frustrated, was clearly overreacting and over-hitting people across the board at that point. And then he goes on to score a goal. I mean, it's like, dude, that dude shouldn't have been on the field at that point. And listen, I'm not one to usually complain about refs. I'm a guy that's like, you got to play the refs as they are. But that looked like a real legit thrown elbow to me. And he split Martinez's lip wide open. I'd be surprised if there weren't stitches in that thing after the game, because he cracked him pretty good.
Well, I don't think that the failure to give him a second yellow or a straight red is what caused Dallas to lose the game. I still think Ibiaga should have defended that header better.
Fair.
And there's other, the second goal for Atlanta I just thought was poorly defended as well. Nicely taken shot, but letting that guy have all that space seemed ridiculous to me in that moment. But I agree. I was after all the other VAR incidences that have happened across all the different leagues over the weekend, it was not the best weekend for the argument to use VAR. At least that it works for sure. All right, so that means with 9 games left, Dallas sits in the standings at 9th place. They are on 34 points. They're 2 points behind San Jose. They are a mere point ahead of Austin and all of the Austin stuff that's going on. And, we've talked about this before. It's a super tight deal. The difference between Dallas in 9th and LAFC in 3rd is 6 points. So it's a couple wins, and, man, it's going to be a weird race to the end, Buzz.
Yeah, you can get 24 points out of that total. Well, they're not going to win out, but obviously, there's 24 points available. So no one's going to get that, but you're probably going to have to get at least to 42, I would think. So you probably need at least a third of them, if not half of them. With this as tight as it is, and with awesome in San Jose and Minnesota, even Kansas City starting to come on, you're all the way up to Houston, perhaps maybe. You're still looking at you're probably going to have to get to maybe even mid to 45, 47 potentially. It's really hard to figure that out because it's so much dependent on how other people play. But it's not going to be super simple. If some teams will collapse on you, that'll really help. And obviously if you're not the team that collapses, but even if you can play 500, that probably can get you in. But it's going to be squeaky. That losing streak in the middle of the season, was a 6th gamer, man, that really put you in a bad spot. But if you look at the standings, not just in terms of the points, but if you look from where Dallas is to 2nd place, Seattle has 11 wins. Dallas down to Dallas and Austin is 9 wins, and Kansas City has 8. So it's 2 wins separating 2nd place to 10th, and 3 wins from 2nd to 11th. So you just win a couple of games, and you're going to jump way up in these standings because it's so tight. So you don't have to crush it, but again, everybody else is probably going to be playing about 500 ball. All these teams are basically 500 teams, or slightly better. So if you end up being slightly better than 500, you should make it.
Well, it's an interesting run because when they get back from the international break on Saturday the 16th, Seattle comes to town. Then they've got to turn around and play a game in Salt Lake on the 20th, that following Wednesday, and then come home Saturday and play Columbus, another high-scoring team, by the way. They've actually scored 1 more goal in the league. They're the highest-scoring team in the East. I believe I'm correct in saying that. So, man, they've got work cut out for them. It's a toss-up for me at this point because then they go to Philadelphia, then they go to Houston. Then Colorado comes to town, which is maybe the chum on the list, but Dallas is, that's their bogey team.
Yeah, they just fired their coach.
Yeah, and so and then they've got San Jose, to close the season out. So, to end the season with Lucci coming to town, you may have your playoff spot on the line in that game. You
might.
And by the way, they're probably fighting for that same playoff spot.
Oh yeah, that's probably a head-to-head 6-pointer. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
Look, Seattle is good. But it's here. That's a balance. Salt Lake City actually is only 500 at home, bizarrely. So you probably like your chances to go in there and try and kill the game and steal it late. Of your road trips, you probably feel like maybe that's the one you can get a point or something. But then, as you mentioned, Columbus is high powered, so that'll be like Atlanta. Maybe Yaga better be available. Can you hold them down and get a goal or two? Going to Philly is going to be rough. I mean, that's a game you might rotate heavily and just eat it. Going to Houston, you're going to want to show to that game. That's a rival. The game will be physical and nasty, I bet you. Colorado, they're going to have fired their coach. They're going to get a bounce. How big a bounce? They're pretty terrible, so I don't know that it'll be enough, but you're right. That's always the bogey team, and then Lucci coming here. Oh, thank goodness LA is actually terrible and you get them the last game of the year on the road, though. So again, like you might be having to go to LA needing a point or two to get in or cement your position. None of that's going to get you what you want, which is a home game. So like your chances to get back, unless you can run the table at home and get a result or two on the road, that would get you back into the top 4, I think. Because you have, was it 1, 2, 3, 4? You have 4 home games left and 4 road games. So if you run the table and get one or two results, maybe even if they're just ties, you might can get back into the top half. But I mean, have you been looking at a team that's going to run the table at home? I don't know, man. I mean, they do pretty good, but they don't win them all, because they keep the games tight.
Well,
So
and they also have to count on other teams' performance as well. And the reality is that 5th, 6th, and 7th, Houston, Vancouver, and Minnesota, all 3 of those teams are in fairly good form over the course of the last 5 or 6 games. They're all on winning records. Minnesota's on a nice little tear. We know Houston is, and Vancouver's not doing bad. San Jose's more like Dallas. They haven't been that great of late, and obviously the story of Austin. And Kansas City is behind there too. So, and Kansas City now Kansas City's won their last 2 games. I mean, Kansas City in their last 5 games are 2 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws. So you can't afford to see Kansas City get hot. So yeah, man, they're just gonna have to do it. And I guess the thing now that Kamungo is hurt, this is critical that Ansah actually does something. He can't just be a guy, he's got to be somebody that pays off as a purchase in mid-season purchase.
I know. Or just play Dante. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it feels to me like 7 to 11, Minnesota, San Jose, Dallas, Austin, Kansas City, 5 teams, 3 spots. That's kind of what it feels like with 8 games left. You can't point like a head-to-head kind of thing because 8 games is too many. But 24 points theoretically available, but no one's going to get all 24. So like those 5 teams are all basically 500-ish kind of teams, and whichever 3 of those teams are tilt slightly better is going to be it. And that brings me back to why I felt relatively positive about this game. If Tafari is in there, if Paz is in there, now that you have Jesus back, now that Velasco's cooking in midfield, now that Arriola's feeling pretty good, now that Illarramendi looks pretty good, my only real worry is going to be this team is not deep enough to rotate heavy through this tough stretch of midweek games. It's like 4 straight weeks of midweek games, I think it is. So, that's going to be the burden when you bring in a Frazier, when you give Tafari a game off, when you give Jesus a game off, or have to sub him out early 3 or 4 times. What's that going to do to your form? And that's where you run into a worry, I think. This team is not mega deep like LAFC is or St. Louis apparently is. It's a little thin.
Buzz, are they going to make the playoffs?
I think they do, but I think they're looking.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I think they do. Like I said, I think when Tafari and Paz are in there, the defense is much better, and I think Jesus has some points to prove still. And I think Paul's back to form. Losing Bernie is not as the end of the world. Bernie shouldn't be starting. Like that's not going to swing things either way. It's O'Brien or Illarramendi or excuse me, Ansah that has to do something, And even in that case, there are other guys like you. Maybe we'll end up with Leggett on the wing, or maybe in order to win games, putting Velasco out there just to finish the year might be the best call. Because then you can have Leggett and Illarramendi and him out on the wing. That might be better as a group than having Allen in the middle and Leggett on the bench or Illarramendi on the bench. And having somebody like O'Brien starting, perhaps. I don't know. Those are on the coaches to call that. But I think this team is better than the 6-game losing streak with the massive, massive injuries all in one position and missing Jesus for the whole Gold Cup. I think this team is as good as they were the first half of the season, not in the middle part of the season.
All right. Moving on, there was a call-up amongst the ranks, Buzz.
Yeah. Well, Carl Ciante plays for North Texas Soccer Club, so a lot of people may not know who he is, but he plays for Haiti all the time. All the time recently, over the last year or 2. So he's got another call up for the CONCACAF Nations League, which is coming up. He'll probably play a fair bit for them. He's one of the leaders of North Texas. We'll see if he's going to make it to MLS. I'm not convinced yet. Being a starter for Haiti is not the same as being a starter for Mexico. So he got called up, and congrats to him and good luck to him. And hopefully we'll see if he can progress over the next couple of years.
And let's see. It says here on the run sheet in red crayon, Academy roster posts.
Yeah, I just wanted to print my my posts I do every year at the start of the season with all the rosters of the FC Dallas Academy teams and what I know about all the players. I have notes on almost everybody down to like 13 years old. You know, some of those younger kids I'm still learning
Creepy.
about. But, well, no, I don't think I do it creepily. I think I talk to a lot of people.
You do.
There's a lot of people out there that put out a lot of really weird stuff about kids all the time. I saw a ranking today that boggled my mind. But
A what?
A ranking of like talent, and a couple of guys they mentioned from FC Dallas. I'm like, you haven't seen that guy play in a couple of years, have you? But like one guy they had listed for FC Dallas really, really highly doesn't even play here anymore. So I was like, okay, you obviously don't. You know, people do all kinds of stuff without. You notice I focus on the thing I know. You don't see me doing rankings from nationwide. It's like I do the one thing. I know my team. I do this thing. You know, so I'll probably go scout some games this weekend, actually, because there's no FC Dallas games. So.
And the other news I saw you tweet, I think it was yesterday, they're going to put a bunch of kids in UPSL.
Yeah, UPSL is a nationwide amateur league for people that don't know.
Fifth tier?
I think it's fifth. They like to say it's the same level as NPSL or USL2. I disagree, but, you know, tomato, potato. Everything below Division 3 is not official. It's just like whatever you want to call it. So I think it's fifth tier. But the point is that almost every other, not almost every other, there's a lot of MLS teams that rather than running in their U19 team in the MLS MLS Next, they just pulled their team out of that and played them in UPSL. So Dallas is fielding a team in UPSL to get more games. They're still playing their 19 team in the 19 bracket. They just have enough players between kids that are on the north, that are signed for North Texas, that maybe aren't playing as much, that need some minutes, or the 19-year-olds for the academy that aren't up for North Texas yet, or maybe even like a 17-year-old or a 15-year-old, you want to try and push them up and see what happens. So effectively, if you'll excuse the analogy, this is to North Texas as North Texas is to FC Dallas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
It's a stepping stone between the 19 academy and North Texas. So unless you're like a 15-year-old kid getting your chance to try play against adults, most of the time this is going to be for guys who are going to either go to college or maybe are trying to, at like 18, 19, 20, progress to MLS to get some minutes or something. You know, it's kind of a step below North Texas, if you will. But it's new. It's brand new. It's a nationwide amateur league. People like 40360 play in this league. That's the teams you're going to run into. DKSC has an adult team that's a bunch of college players or ex-college players or semi-pro players in this league. It is a really, really good, super high amateur. Like the guys like this get into the national amateur cups. They even get into open cup, stuff like that. So from time to time, it's a really high level. It's just not pro or semi-pro. It's slightly below that, if you will.
Well, where will they play those games?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'll look into that. I don't know the answer to that. They had their first game this weekend, so.
Because I thought to play in UPSL, you had to have your own field, because it wasn't like there was a place everybody went to play. I thought UPSL was you got to find, because wasn't that Lone Star Republic in the UPSL, and they played their games at Green Hill.
That sounds right.
I think that's correct. Well, anyway, that'll be fun to see how that plays out.
Well, you can use like the
any of the fields up in Frisco.
Yeah, I'm sure the complex up there, one of those fields will be their home fields. Whether it could be the FC Dallas training field, or it probably more likely is going to be Field 3, which is the one just north of the first team field, because the first team field trains on that field every day, and it kind of has become like a second first team field, but it's not behind the fence. And it has a couple of little bleachers there. So that's my pure guess.
Yeah.
That's where they'll play, is on that field, just one field north of the first team training field. But I only heard about the team. I haven't heard about where they're playing or anything. But like I said, I do know their first game was this weekend. I think they actually played 4-0, which is interesting. You know what? I bet if I went to the UPSL site, it would say, it didn't occur to me to go look, because I'm sure they'll be on the schedule, with some kind of roster posted, just like everybody else in that league probably does. So.
Well, with what appeared to be another fine attendance, I don't think it was listed officially as a sellout, was it, Buzz?
I don't believe it was a sellout. No.
Yeah, but it did appear to be a nice late arriving as always. But by 20, 30 minutes into the game, it looked very full. And this is now becoming the norm for this club. I mean, we've come a really long way. From where we used to be. When goodness gracious, and tied to that was a tweet that I saw that came out the other day from Doug Greenberg, who was writing for Front Office Sports and wrote a whole article about how when Messi comes to town, things go very well in terms of ticket sales. And he specifically called out Dallas. And I guess he had a conversation with Katz or somebody up there. And this was surprising. So a paragraph in his article about the Messi effect across the league was the following. I'm going to read it. The club has sold as many season ticket packages at this point in the year as it did by the end of last season in 2022. That is and that 60% of those sales happened since Messi's appearance in town on the 6th. That's crazy. And he says by the end of this year, FC Dallas expects to have sold the most season tickets in 1 year in club history. Now, that isn't saying too much because Dallas has been historically famous at not selling a lot of season tickets. I'd make the argument that Dallas has been one of the lowest ranked season ticket selling teams consistently dating back to the 1996.
Yeah, for those of us that have been here to watch 25 years of the last 2 years have been staggering in terms of their stunning improvement in the stands and selling tickets and creating attention. And 100% credit to them. They've changed their ways. It is so much better. And there's information in that article reinforces a rumor that I had heard, effectively the same thing, that there were an immense amount of people that came to the Messi game and said, you know what, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And called to buy season tickets. They had a massive season ticket bounce off that Messi game. And that's the point of that's why guys like Messi are worth it. They're few and far between, but it's why the whole league was like, we're all going to subsidize this because the whole league is going to bounce off this guy. Just like Beckham did, this guy is too. And I'm sure the next World Cup will do it too. Again, I bet you.
I'm sure the effect that Beckham had is a multiple with Messi for sure.
Oh,
but
yeah.
just to kind of put some perspective, especially for those FC Dallas curious listening that have not been following for the club for a very long time, maybe you're new to the pod because you went to the Messi game and you've started listening. But what's interesting, and I continue to contend, this is the most underreported sports story in DFW, which is Dallas's attendance turnaround since last year. It's crazy to me. I did a little research, and now, again, I'm working off some different sites that report attendance numbers. Not everybody is correct. Like, one of them doesn't have Dallas's correct maximum attendance number. They have the old 20,000 number, not the current 19,096 number. So some of the numbers get mixed up, so you have to do this. But just to kind of make a point, Dallas currently at this moment now sits 10th in the league in what I consider to be the most important stat, which is not sellouts or attendance averages. It's the percentage of capacity because everybody's got a different sized stadium. So how many tickets can you sell for that stadium? Dallas sits 10th in the league at 96.5% or essentially 97%. But for perspective, in 2016, the best season this team has ever seen, Dallas was 19th of 28 of 19 of the teams at 6. Am I reading that correctly? I wrote this down. They were 19th in the league with 68.8% capacity sold. And in 2010, the year they made MLS Cup, they were 14th of the 16 teams that existed back then at 52.8.
Yeah, the team has always been really, really low in terms of that. A part of it, too, in the early days, of course, was the Cotton Bowl was massive, and that really skewed that stat. But just in terms of Toyota Stadium, they've never really consistently filled that place. It's always been, and even more so, like, the actual people in the building was never the announced number. So, like, we would look around, and then we were like, this is nowhere near the number you're saying. Well, now the numbers they're saying look like what is actually there. Or at least very, very close to it. It's a staggering improvement. I again, credit to them because they're the ones that have turned it around. Nothing to do with anybody else. It's not the field. It's not the play. It's just a change in marketing And because we're talking about coming out of Lucci when they missed the playoffs, right? And so that was like a low in terms and COVID and all that stuff. Post COVID, man, they're crushing it, and they're just doing really great things. We're actually to a point, and I cannot believe this, where we're now having to think about this team needing a bigger stadium.
Well, or at least doing something with the empty old North End.
Well, yes, adding capacity.
Yes.
Either fix the North End or add a deck or something. We're to the point where we're now considering this team might need a 30,000 seater. To jump.
That might be a stretch, Buzz.
Well, where are you going to do? I mean, if you're going to spend a bunch of money, are you going to go from 20 to 23? No, you're going to go to 30. You're not going to bother to go upgrade a little bit because
no, you're right.
You'll just be happy to sell out for a couple of seasons, create scarcity, create demand, create hype, right? And then you can make a jump from 20 to 27. I don't know, 20. I mean, the designer's going to limit it, right? What you can do, but you don't need 70, you don't need 50. But we're at a point where we have to now think about what's the next step, what's the next phase. I mean, not a day-to-day fan, maybe perhaps, but you and I do, and the team certainly does. They better be.
Well, I would be pleased at this point if they would invest a small amount of money in creating some sort of permanent seating in the old beer garden that creates a new fan section, like we've all talked about, a safe standing section. I'm convinced that can be accomplished fairly easily if they were willing to put the money into it versus the ultimate deal, which is tearing down the existing north and east sides and rebuilding them, in the same way they did the south side. So
it'll be interesting to see how the lack of the gambling affects that idea. Because remember, we've been hearing all kinds of talk of tearing down the north and the east and rebuilding that side with like this hotel, mixed events, all these things, perhaps a sports book, all with the idea of the World Cup. Well, we're already getting towards the end of 2023. So, you're about to be in the season that's 2 away from the World Cup. So you better start moving if you're going to do it. And so the longer it takes, the more I think that's not happening. The more I think maybe it will be just something in the north end. The more I think it will just be trying to retrofit in there. Because we use the stage hardly at all anymore. I don't think there's hardly any concerts in there.
Buffett's dead, so it's not going to be him anymore.
Oh my God, you're so awful.
Well, he moved his show someplace else, didn't he? Didn't they stop having Parrot?
Yeah, it hasn't been
there in a while.
Still awful.
Oh, sorry.
Rest in peace, Jimmy.
Yeah. Well, there we go, Buzz. Well, hey, kids, buckle up. We're in the September crush. This is where MLS finally gets really interesting because there is going to be a bum rush for all of those playoff spots. And despite the fact that there being more playoff spots than there not being playoff spots, there is no guarantee Dallas is going to be in one of them. So this is where it gets interesting for sure.
Yeah, let me tag on one tiny bit of piece of news here that sort of, I only bring it up because of what we just talked about. Right, the idea of the stage not being used anymore. Okay, they put out a press release. Toyota Stadium did this week. Maybe it was last week. It was yesterday.
Recently,
I just looked it up. It was yesterday. I just looked. From our friend Jeannie Miller, the FCS Bowl game, the Division I championships that they do at Frisco Stadium, they just signed on with ABC to broadcast that game.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that have to do with FC Dallas? Well, nothing. But if that game is gaining traction in terms of audience interest and people that want to come to it at Toyota Stadium, that is a factor in stadium renovation. If that bowl game is like, oh, hey, look, we'd like another 5.
That's a big part of how the South End got done.
That's exactly how stadiums get done. Look at the Cotton Bowl renovation that happened for one game. And they don't even play that game there anymore. You remember that renovation like true. A decade ago? They dropped it was like $20 million or something to renovate the upper deck and do the scoreboard and all that stuff. And the Cotton Bowl moved in Texas Stadium in Arlington anyway. And they have another bowl game there now. But bowl games and football, American football, get you money. They get you stuff. So do we care about it here? I don't know. But for it to go to a network like ABC and have some money and have some interest and some, oh my goodness, that might be a big deal. That all's involved in it.
Yeah, if that ends up being a driver for them fixing the sore thumb that is the stage, that I'm fine with that. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, and they have that other bowl game that they do too, that whatever they call that thing, the Texas Bowl or something. It's a low tier like Division I game that gets played there also. Like last year was Houston and SMU or something. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't remember what it was. It's not a great bowl game, but
Texas?
Whatever. It's still money. It still drives, bowl games matter when you're talking about these stadiums, and the continued addition of new Frisco high schools. Like right now, I think are they up to 4, I think?
No, I think they're up to 6 high schools.
Is it 6?
Yeah.
It's 6. I remember when they built Toyota Stadium, I had a conversation with the guy from the school district, and he said eventually they're going to have 10.
Yeah, I believe it. It may be more than 6, actually, now that I think, because I think they opened another one this year, or they're going to open another one next year, or something like that. There's so many of them you can't keep track of. You're like, how did they come up with that stupid name for high school?
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, I'm dead serious. Curious. Start hydrating now, because this is going to get really sweaty between now and the as we get into October from the end of the season. This is where it gets very serious.
Imagine if in old MLS if you'd gotten the ESPN 2:00 game this weekend, like this Saturday 2:00 at Toyota Stadium. Can you imagine how awful it would have been?
No.
I'm really glad they don't have a game, actually, given how hot it is. I'm hoping it's going to break the weather in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, yes, and we should throw in Tanner Tessman got a call up. He is with the national team this weekend. I can't remember who got injured or knocked off the roster, but Tessman, former Dallas kid and Auburn kicker wannabe. Or was it Clemson? No, it was Auburn. Or was it Clemson?
It was Clemson. Dabo Sweeney's his friend.
Dabo Sweeney. That's right. Yeah. So he's traveling from Venice to come join the national team, and that's pretty kick-ass. I've been dying to see him play with the national team.
He had the double soccer football scholarship. Remember, he was going to kick.
Oh, yeah. I totally remember.
Yep.
Dabo helped him get his homegrown deal.
He did, actually.
That's one of my favorite stories in MLS lore, FC Dallas lore, is that Dabo Sweeney sweet-talked the nation into believing Tanner Tessman needed a homegrown deal by threatening to make him an NCAA kicker.
Well, Tanner also played really well in spring camp.
Yes.
Yeah, when somebody else got hurt and he got invited that's one of the things about Tanner with me is like, I don't know how you watch Tanner dominate the U19s that year and be like the best player on the field every game and not think he was ready for a contract, that you waited until he actually came into camp. I was like, I don't know what you're waiting for, but maybe you're right. Maybe Dabo pushed it over the line with all that stuff. So. Okay. Before we go, one last thing, Peter, Chris Kappas moved from Brøndby to what's the club in southern Molde, where Zlatan started, I believe.
Yes.
Molde, whatever, how you pronounce that. So
that actually caught the eye of my Norwegian friend Lars, by the way. Yes.
A team that's in the Champions League, I believe. So hopefully we'll get some action. Chris is at a good stage where he needs lots of PT, so hopefully they'll actually play him because he wasn't getting playing time where he was.
Good for him.
Yep. Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer90.com. They're the place you want to go for FC Dallas, North Texas Soccer Club, and European gear. They got all the best stuff. Premier League, Bundesliga, La Liga, you name it, they got it. Third Degree listeners get 20% off at checkout if you use the code Third Degree. You know the code by now, 3RDDEGREE at checkout. Occasionally, some exclusions do apply.
I'm going to try to dismount one more time, Buzz, but I'm going to do that by reiterating, everybody get ready. This is going to be a long, sweaty 6 weeks between now and the end of the season. Just be prepared and don't say we didn't warn you, okay?
Okay.
All right. Obviously Dan did not join us, so hopefully he will be back next week, Buzz. So thank you, sir, for all your insight, information, and wisdom.
You're welcome.
And thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. We will speak to you next week on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast. Where's Dan?
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.